Today I'm going to show you how to change scenes inside Unity, and we're going to do this using a scene manager, because I know that you can just kind of like do one line of code and then swap between scenes, but I think it's a good idea that we do this using a manager so we can actually handle this in a proper way. I do also want to mention that this works in 3D and 2D, so you don't need to worry about that I'm sitting inside a 2D project. It's going to work with 3D as well, so if you're sitting with a 3D project, this is going to work for you too. And the last thing I want to mention is that there's many ways of creating a scene manager, and this is going to be my take on how to create a scene manager to get you started with actually handling scenes inside your game. Everyone watching this video is going to sit with a different type of project, so just kind of like take this template that I'm giving you and implement it into your project however you might want to have it best suit your project. So with that said, let's actually go and talk about how to create a scene manager. So as you can see, I do have a project open in front of me here. This is a 2D URP project, but like I said, it's not really going to matter if you're sitting in a 3D project or a 2D project. Doesn't matter, it's going to work either way. Now you might be looking at this thinking, oh, well, Daniel, you already have a bunch of things prepared beforehand, but it's really not that much. And it's something you can very quickly set up in 2 seconds if you want to have the same thing. Basically, I have 2 scenes inside my project. I have a level 1 or level 01, and I also have a main menu. And these are going to be the 2 scenes that I want to swap between using my scene manager. Of course, you can create many more scenes if you want to. I just want to have 2 scenes that I can swap between. With that, you can actually see that I have some stuff inside my main menu scene. I do actually have a main menu that I created. And you'll notice that inside my hierarchy window, the way that I like to do things is I like to create a empty game object, and I just name it dash and then something. So for example, I have one called UI dash, and this is just going to be a top category for my particular UI elements inside my scene. So I have everything in sort of a system inside my hierarchy window. So we don't just have a bunch of things in here that are going to make a really long list down. So as you can see, I have one for my setup, which is going to be my main camera or all my cameras and my lighting inside my scene. I do have one called managers, which is going to be for all my managers inside the game. I do have one for my UI elements. So as you can see right now, this is my UI elements inside the scene here. And then I have one called environment, and this is going to be the one that have all the different game objects inside your scene. So like your player, your environment, like trees and the ground and platforms and stuff like that. And inside the UI category here, I just right clicked and created some sort of UI element, which creates a canvas with the UI element inside of it. Again, this is not really like a UI tutorial on how to create a menu. I do have one on my channel if you want to check it out. Basically, I just created a canvas with a bunch of UI elements inside of it. It's just very basic UI stuff that I did in here. I renamed my canvas to main menu instead and just started creating all these elements. So I have a background, a new game button, I have an exit game button, and then I have a title at the top here. And that's all I have for inside the first scene here. Inside my second scene called level 1, it's actually even simpler. Inside level 1, I just created a couple of game elements inside my environment category. So I have a ground, I have a player that has nothing on top of them. I have no scripts or anything. They're just like to give us some visuals to see, oh, this is a new scene. I do, however, inside my UI tab, just have a very basic canvas that I renamed to game menu. And I just put in a main menu button. And again, I just sort of like went in and, changed it so that when I hover my mouse on them, change its color. You could do that very easily if I were to go back inside my main menu here. You can see if I were to go down to one of these buttons, we can go down and then you can just sort of like change the colors so that when you put your mouse cursor on top of them, they change color. So as you can see here, they change into a little bit darker version of themselves because I set it up in here. But that's basically what I did for my game elements. So what we want to do now is when I click new game, it should take me into level 1. The first thing you need to make sure you do is after you created these 2 different scenes down here, or 3 or however many scenes you decided to create for this project here, is you need to make sure you go inside your build settings. So inside file, build settings, you can see that we now have some scenes inside our scenes in build at the top here. You're most likely going to have a sample scene because that's what the Unity starts up with when you create a new project. Just go ahead and right click on it and say remove selection, and then drag in the scenes that you have down here inside your scenes folder into your project so they actually get added inside the scenes in build. After adding all your scenes, you can actually see that we have some index numbers over here on the right side, and these are actually going to be the indexes of that particular scene. So what you want to make sure you do is that the main menu is at the very top, so it has an index as 0, and then level 1, level 2, level 3, however many levels you might have inside your game are going to go down below. Start with level 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. So with that, you can close this down, and now we're actually ready to start scripting. So going back inside my assets folder, make sure you have a scripts folder so we can have some system inside our project here. And inside the scripts folder, we're going to right click and create a new C# script. Now this one is going to be called ScenesManager. And it's very important that you don't call it SceneManager, but ScenesManager with an S behind it, because there is actually a built-in class inside our Unity classes called SceneManager. And if you rename your script the same way as that particular class, then things are going to start getting confused inside your script. So with that, go ahead and open it up inside your Visual Studio. And inside Visual Studio, we're going to start setting up our manager that is going to manage all the scenes inside the game. And this is actually going to be set up in a very typical manager fashion, which is, in case you haven't learned this before, this is going to be very useful for you. We're going to go up to the very top here where we have our class ScenesManager, and we're going to create a static version of this class here, which means that we can actually access this class from any script inside our game without having to actually reference the script first. So essentially we just directly grab the class because it's static, so it's just like top level accessible from anywhere. And there can only exist one particular version of this class here inside your game. This makes it very good to have as a manager inside your game since there's only one version of it, so we can't have like multiple copies or anything. It's just one top level class that takes care of handling your scenes that you can access from anywhere. So the way we create a static ScenesManager class is by saying we want to have a public static, and then we want to name it the name of the class, so ScenesManager with an S behind it, and then I want to call it instance. Again, you can rename it to anything you want, but instance is just kind of like a good typical name to give all these static classes here. After this, we want to delete all the method from inside the class because we don't actually need them. And I'm going to create a awake method. Inside the awake method, I just simply want to get instance and set it equal to this, which means that right now, instance is going to be equal to this class. And in this kind of simple way, we can now access this class from anywhere just using ScenesManager.instance and then access any kind of method or property or fields that we have inside this particular class here. Now, since we're going to be doing stuff with the scene manager inside Unity, we do also need to access the class that I was talking about that is actually called Scene Manager. So at the very top here, we're going to say using Unity engine dot scene management. So now we have access to the namespace that have all the different classes that actually has something to do with changing scenes and doing things inside your game when it comes to scene management. And now before we start creating any kind of methods that do something with changing scenes inside your game, I actually want to create a enum. Now an enum is a data type that we have inside C#, and I do actually have a video inside my C# course where I actually talk about enums. But basically this is just going to have a list of constants inside of it that we cannot change, and these constants are going to have an index number. So the way we're going to create this enum is going to be by creating a public, and then we're going to say enum, and I'm going to give it some kind of name. So in this case, we're just going to call it scene. And inside our scene enum, I'm just going to go and create a list of items, which again are going to be constants. So we're just going to go and call this one main menu, comma. Then I'm going to call this one level 01. And with that, we now have a name for all the scenes we have inside our game. So with the enum created here, the only thing you need to be aware of is that whenever you add new scenes inside your game, you need to do two things. You need to add the new scenes inside the enum, and they have to be in the same order as the scenes inside your build settings. So whenever you create a new scene inside Unity, you of course want to drag it into the build settings so it's in there. And then you want to go inside this enum here and make sure that the ordering of the scenes is the same as inside the build settings. If you have that, everything is going to work perfectly. And the reason everything is going to work perfectly that way is because if you were to go inside the enum and take index number 0, that is going to be the main menu, and index number 1 is going to be level 1. And wouldn't you know it, if we were to go back inside Unity and go inside the build settings, these index numbers over here on the right are going to match up with the index numbers inside the enum. So that's why we want to make sure we have them in the same order inside the build settings and inside the enum. Going back inside our scripts, what I want to do is I do want to start creating a couple of methods that can actually handle changing scenes inside my game here. The first thing I want to create is going to be a load scene method that just simply loads up any kind of scene that I tell it to load up. So I'm going to create a public void. I'm going to call this one load scene. Inside the load scene parameters, I actually want to include an actual scene that I want to load up, which is going to be of the enum scene type. And I want to call it something like scene, just so we have some kind of name for the placeholder here. And of course, the reason that we want to have this is so that we can actually take one of these main menu or level 1 from inside the enum and pass it inside this method here. And then it's going to swap scene to that particular scene there. So going inside our actual method, what I want to do is I want to grab the SceneManager class, not the ScenesManager class that we created at the top here, but the one from inside this particular namespace up here at the top here. So we're going to say SceneManager dot load scene parentheses. And then we just simply want to grab the scene and say dot to string. And the reason we want to do this is because right now the scene is actually an enum data type, but it needs to be passed in as a string so we can actually read it inside our load scene method, which of course just takes care of loading up the scene that we tell it to. And that's basically all we need to have inside this method here. But we do want to have a couple more methods just for the, just to have them. So what I want to do is I want to go down and I want to create a new public void, and I want to call this one load new game, just so we have a particular method that just takes care of loading up a new game. So what I want to do is I want to grab our SceneManager dot load scene, and inside the parentheses here, I'm just going to load up the scene enum that we have dot level 1 dot to string, just like we did above. And with this, we now have a method that only takes care of loading up the first level inside your game. So you don't need to call upon load scene and pass in, level 1 or anything like that. You can just call upon this one and it's going to load up the first level. But let's also do another one. Let's go ahead and create one that loads up the next scene. So let's say you finish level 1 or level 2 or level 3, and then you need to load up level 4. And it just needs to happen automatically, and we can just go ahead and do that. And that's the reason why we actually needed the index numbers inside the build settings and inside the enum to match up, because in order to do this, those need to match up. So I can create a public void load next scene. And in here, I want to do the same thing. So I want to grab the SceneManager dot load scene. And then inside our SceneManager class, we actually have a method called getActiveScene parentheses dot build index. And then we just add 1 to it. So basically what we're just doing here is we're taking the active scene inside Unity, so the one we have right now running inside our game, and we want to go inside the build settings, and we want to grab the index number, which is through the build index, and we want to add 1 to it. So if you did things correctly inside the build settings and had level 2 right below level 1, then this should load up level 2. And let's go ahead and add a last one in here. So let's say public void load main menu parentheses and curly brackets. Let's just go ahead and make one that loads up the main menu. So we can actually go ahead and say, instead of new game up here, we just want to go in and say we want to grab the main menu instead. So now you have a couple of different methods in here that we did together just to kind of like do some different things inside your game. Again, you could just work with load scene and that would be perfectly fine. But I think it's just kind of neat to have some methods in here that just takes care of doing one particular thing inside your game, like loading up a new game or loading up just the next level inside the build index or loading the main menu or something. So, once you have, let's say 10 scenes inside your game, then this one particular one up here called load scene is probably going to be very useful to load a particular scene inside your level, especially if you have a game where you jump back and forth between levels. That one is going to be very useful. And really, this was just kind of like to show that we had something called active scene and build index and, stuff like that, to show a couple of different ways you can reference scenes inside your game. Inside Unity, the next thing we want to do is we actually want to make sure that the buttons inside the main menu and inside level 1 is actually working. So I can go back and forth between level 1 and the main menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside my scripts folder, right click, create a new script, and I'm going to call this one UIMainMenu. Now, a thing that I would probably recommend you start doing once you do a larger project is to create subfolders inside your scripts folder. So you have one called UI and you have one called managers and stuff like that. Let's actually go and do that. So inside our scripts folder here, create a folder, call it UI, create one called managers, and just go ahead and just move them in there. So UIMainMenu is going to go inside our UI, and ScenesManager is going to go inside managers. So what I want to do is I want to go inside my new script, inside the UI folder, and I want to open it up inside my Visual Studio. And we're going to go and start creating some logic for our main menu here, which is something I know a lot of people might want to see because they don't know how to create logic for a main menu. So the first thing we want to do here is we actually want to load in the UI namespace so we can actually start using UI methods inside our script here. So at the very top, I'm just going to go ahead and create a Unity Engine .UI, so we can actually grab the UI methods. And inside my class, I'm going to create a field, which is going to be one where we actually grab the button that we want to look for and actually do something with. So I'm going to do a serialized field. And I'm going to call this one button as a type. And I'm going to call it start game. Then I want to go inside Unity and actually make sure I pass in the button so we don't accidentally end up not doing that at some point. So inside my main menu scene, inside my hierarchy, I want to make sure I actually drag the script upon the right thing. So I'm going to take my script and I'm going to drag it into my canvas, which is the one that I named main menu. Again, if you didn't rename this at any point, it's just going to be called canvas inside your example. But make sure it's inside the canvas and not inside any of the canvas elements that you have inside of here. So if I were to scroll down, you can now see that I have my script at the bottom here, but I don't have anything passed into the start game button. So I actually want to grab my new game. So we should actually call it new game, not start game. And I just want to drag in my new game down here. We can actually go back inside our scripts and let's actually just go ahead and rename this to new game, just so we call it the same thing. Then let's go ahead and clean things up a little bit here. So I'm going to remove my comment and I'm going to remove my update. Inside the start method, I'm going to grab my new game and paste it in. And then I want to call upon a on-click event. And then I'm going to use a add listener method, which basically means that if I were to click on this button inside my main menu, then I want to add a listener that needs to listen for a particular method that I have inside this class here. Now, right now, we don't have a method to pass in. So let's actually go and create one. So I just want to create a private void, and I'm going to call this one start game. Actually, no, let's call it new game because that actually makes sense to our field up here. So new game. Actually, let's call it start new game. I'm going to confuse you now. With this, we can now go in and actually tell it to load up a scene using one of the methods that we have inside our scenes manager. So what I can do is I can reference my scenes manager. Remember not to write scene manager, but scenes manager. Then we need to call upon the static class itself, which is called instance. Right now, if we were to go back inside scenes manager, you can see we named it instance up here at the very top, which now means that we can actually access any of the methods we have inside that particular class. So we can actually say load, and then it gives me a couple of options here. We can load main menu, load new game, load next scene, or just load a particular scene. So in this case here, since this is starting a new game, I just want to go ahead and load up my new game. Just to kind of show this, since I know some people might have questions about it, if I wanted to load a particular scene from inside my load scene method here, since we need to pass in something, how do we do that? If I were to go back here, I can actually say load scene. And what you would need to do is you actually need to go in and reference to one of the enums from inside the scene manager class. So you would actually say scene manager, and it actually comes out with a suggestion here. So it says SceneManager.scene because it knows what type needs to be passed in here. And then you just tell it what kind of scene you want to load in. So dots, and then it gives you suggestions here. So you can say level 1, for example. And that's how you would do that, just so you know how to use that load scene method from inside our scene manager. But let's go ahead and go back here since we want to load a new game, which doesn't take any parameters. And that's basically all we had to do in here. Actually, no, we need to pass in the start new game method inside our add listener up here. So with that done, we now actually need to create a second script for my level 1 button. If we were to actually go back and load up my level 1, you can see I have a main menu button up here at the top here. Let's actually go and change the color of that text. That looks weird. There we go. Now it has a white text instead. So what I want to do is I want to go back inside my scripts folder, inside my UI, and I want to create a new script that is going to be called UIGameMenu, since that is going to be the menu inside my game here. So what I can do is I can actually go ahead and, again, drag and drop that inside my canvas, which is the game menu that I have up here. So we're doing the exact same thing as we did with the previous one, where we just dragged it into the canvas, scroll down to the bottom, and then we want to drag in the reference to the button that we actually want to work when we press it. Right now, of course, we don't have any code inside the script, so let's actually go ahead and load up the UIGameMenu. And inside of here, we can actually go ahead and just copy paste a bunch of things from inside the main menu, since we need to do the same thing. So the Unity Engine UI, we need to have that namespace. We do also need to go in and just copy everything from inside the actual class, paste it in here. Make sure you don't copy the class itself, because some people do that mistakenly and then everything is going to give you errors. Then I'm going to rename the field up here so it doesn't say new game, but main menu. And then I'm just going to go ahead and copy it down here so we don't get any error messages. Then I want to call this method down here load main menu. And then we want to pass in the right method inside the add listener, just so we make sure there's no errors. And all you need to do here is now grab the proper method that you want to load from inside our ScenesManager. So instead of the load new game, in this case here, we will want to load a main menu. And that's basically all we need to do. So with that, we now just need to do one more thing inside Unity, which is to actually create a manager that can have the script on it to actually manage things inside the game. So inside the hierarchy, inside my managers, I'm going to right click it and I'm going to create a empty game object and I'm going to create a ScenesManager. Make sure it is ScenesManager. Then I'm going to drag my manager on top of it. So inside my scripts folder, I'm going to grab my manager and I'm going to drag it on top of that particular game object. Do also double check inside your UI that the button is actually set up. So if you go inside the canvas and you scroll down, that the button is actually drag and dropped inside the main menu button down here. And then I'm going to go back inside my main menu scene. Make sure you save everything. And then I'm going to create a ScenesManager inside my managers as well inside the hierarchy. So we're going to call this one ScenesManager. And then I'm just going to drag my script upon it. So grab the ScenesManager script and drag it onto your ScenesManager. And just like that, everything is done. So if I were to actually go ahead and play this so we can actually test this out, you can see that now we have the main menu. We can actually hover on top of the buttons. If I were to press it, it now loads up my new game, which is the first level inside my game here. I can go to the main menu button, press it, and then we go back to the main menu. So as you can see, we have a working ScenesManager system, at least a very basic one inside our game here. So we can swap between scenes and load up whatever scene we tell it to inside our game here. So with all that, we now learned how to create a basic ScenesManager inside our game. We might do a loading screen next time, so that might be fun. So hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. I'd like to take some time at the end here to thank all the different patrons and all the different community members who has been supporting the channel, as well as a huge thanks to Kelly Corvey, who is actually sponsoring the channel at the moment. So thank you everyone for supporting what I do. It means a lot and it's what's keeping this channel going. So thank you so much for all the support, and I'll see you guys next time.